Two presidential candidates, two town hall events in prime time tonight. Facebook and Twitter attempt to suppress a disputed political story about Joe Biden, and the LA Dodgers make postseason history. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Thursday, October 15th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hi, Carlo.
Hey, Jill. Good morning. I'm warning you. The news today is annoying me, like it hasn't in a while. Just giving a fair warning.
All right, Carlo. So let's just get right to it. Tonight, there will be dueling town halls with both Joe Biden and President Trump. So let's kind of backtrack and think about how we got here. So you'll remember President Trump refused to do a virtual debate. So he and Joe Biden are going to now take their cases to separate primetime audiences. So the Election Commission, you'll remember, changed tonight's debate to virtual after the president had tested positive for coronavirus. And he was hospitalized, and he's now out. So Biden was okay with it and said, all right, let's do it virtual. But the president said he didn't want to do that. He only wanted to do it if it was in person. So then ABC booked Biden for a town hall event tonight, which would have been the same night that the debate would have been. And then NBC went ahead and booked Trump to do his own town hall also tonight at the very same time, 8 p.m. NBC now facing a lot of blowback from former execs, current stars, media critics alike, a lot of internal angst there, who argue that the decision to counter-program the candidates against each other is just simply bad for voters. So these dueling events, again, 8 p.m. tonight. Choose your own adventure, Carlo. Only an election at stake here.
I mean, this upsets me more than it probably should, Jill. And it's because I still have this sort of naive belief that the broadcast news media has a responsibility to the public, which I know is laughable. You can make fun of me. I get it. And, the media, Jill, we have learned so little from 2016 is still astounding to me. When you do something like this, all it does is keep us in our own little filter bubbles, right? Hey, are you a fan of President Trump? You like what he has to say? Watch him on NBC. Oh, you think you're going to vote for Joe Biden? Well, there he is, right over there on ABC. You can watch either one you like. It's really bad. It's just, it's just bad for, like you said, it's just bad for the process, right? I think ABC probably should have just called NBC's bluff and moved Joe Biden to another night, but that's a little inside baseball, I guess. So look, this is a win for President Trump. He will get better ratings because he's better television. That's his whole thing. NBC knows that, by the way. Don't forget, NBC is what gave us The Apprentice and thus the Trump presidency. Not to mention the fact that this will air across all of NBC's channels on cable, whereas ABC just has their broadcast channel. So here's what will happen. Trump will declare victory in the form of ratings, which is the only real measure that he cares about, we know. NBC will have won because they will have had the ratings. We, the voters, of course, will, as always, be the losers. So I'm embarrassed just as a former NBC employee, to be honest, because it just really gets my goat. But on the other hand, I mean, what's really the difference at this point? That first debate was so miserable and soul-crushing to watch. Does anyone really need another one? I mean, whatever. Trump's going to crow about the ratings. Like, okay, I don't think that's going to change anybody's votes. The only thing the town hall format, which was supposed to be the debate tonight, I really like that. I think that's the one sort of these debates that's really valuable because it's much harder for politicians to dodge questions that actually come from real people who are standing right in front of them as opposed to a moderator.
Savannah Guthrie is going to be hosting NBC's town hall with the president. So I think there's a lot of pressure on her to really push back at him and kind of just keep him, in line, answering the questions. The argument is if the president didn't want to do a virtual debate with Joe Biden, why give him a platform at all tonight?
Yes. They should have just said, Joe Biden should have been like, okay, or the debate commission should have been like, okay, this is the debate, this is the plan. If you don't want to show up, we're not going to make you show up, but Otherwise, Joe Biden's going to have 90 minutes to himself in prime time. It's just
Well, that's sort of where it went awry. I don't know why
Yeah.
that didn't happen originally. I mean, with Joe, I get what the Biden campaign was trying to do, saying, look, we're here, we're going to answer questions. But I think it's George Stephanopoulos from ABC who's asking him. It's not like, I don't believe he's doing, a town hall where he's taking questions from viewers, but I could be wrong on that.
the whole thing went awry everywhere. Everyone's to blame.
Except us. We just do this podcast.
Yes.
Okay, the Senate Judiciary Committee is going to start the process of debating Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court today. Following 2 marathon days of questioning, Barrett's wrapped up her testimony. It's pretty much ensured she's going to be confirmed before Election Day in a nearly party line vote, which would cement the most conservative court in 30 years. Most judicial watchers, Carlos, say that she will likely be the most conservative member of this conservative court.
Sounds like it. And that would make sense because she's sort of an acolyte of Judge Antonin Scalia, who passed away in 2016, who was arguably the most conservative member of the court back then.
I just want to mention quickly, one analyst that I was listening to today said she is, the way that she answered her questions, it looks like she's even going to be more conservative than he was.
Oh, good. Yeah, well, I don't know what to say, Jill, other than I didn't watch as much yesterday as I did the day before, although I did catch the part where she called climate change a, quote, contentious matter of public debate, at which point I opened the window to my apartment and almost just jumped out. The fact that I think Democrats, I don't want to get into this too much, but the fact that Democrats even participated in this hearing just shows you how incompetent they are at politics and why they lose so damn much. This was a dog and pony show at the highest level. And I'm trying to not get fired up here, but the Democratic Party, as it stands currently in Washington, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Dianne Feinstein, Jerry Nadler, Dick Durbin, can we get some people who aren't 90 years old running the show? Is that too much to ask in this day and age? I mean, say what you will about somebody like AOC, and I understand she's not in the Senate, but you can bet that she would not have taken an illegitimate, Supreme Court confirmation hearing 3 weeks before an election lying down. It's just, the whole thing I think is really for people who believe that given that what happened in 2016, this nomination should not have happened this close to an election. I think that the Democrats just handled it about as bad as they could have.
Especially given the fact that there's a likelihood that this election itself could end up in the court.
Yes.
And one of the points she was asked yesterday, apparently she worked on Bush v. Gore many moons ago. Okay, let's talk a little COVID, because it's not a great situation what's happening. Europe has now eclipsed the U.S. when it comes to new coronavirus cases. So people who live in around Paris and 8 other French cities are going to be under a nightly curfew for at least 4 weeks. This is part of a major crackdown from the French government to limit the spread of cases. Germany is going to also be toughening restrictions as it records its most new cases since March. In London, the mayor is calling for a quote, circuit breaker, which would be a short national lockdown meant to cut off transmission, as surging cases in the northern UK have spread south. London's going into tier 2 restrictions, and there's going to be a ban on households mixing indoors.
Do you remember when you and I called for a circuit breaker here back in March? Just when we were just like 4 weeks, just everybody stays home 4 weeks. You just kill the transmission, the mode of transmission right there. Of course, nobody took our advice, Jill, because nobody ever does. But that's okay. That's all right.
You really are fired up today. You weren't lying.
I did want to mention a couple on the COVID front, a couple of notable cases here in the U.S. The First Lady confirming last night that Barron Trump, who is the president's youngest son, had tested positive, though he showed no symptoms, which is good news. And Nick Saban, the head coach of Alabama football, also positive. He's the most prominent figure in college sports, I believe, to get the virus.
He is
by the way,
late 60s too.
Yeah, we got to worry about him. We're still notching. I know we're focused on Europe today, but we're still notching 65,000 new cases in this country a day. It's not looking good.
Well, I think that that's what's so interesting about when we talk about what's happening in Europe. It's not that different from what's happening in many places in this country right now, where cases have been doubling over the last few weeks, tripling in some areas. Hospital beds are running out. And you see the difference in the response.
It feels here like.
And in 2 months from now, when everyone's thinking about Thanksgiving and holiday travel, sorry about that, we're going to see where our cases, right? Should we have been taking really strict measures like this at this point, right before, the holiday season and before it gets cold?
You just have the sense now that people are just over this. And it's, which is, I get that. I hate this story. I'm so sick of it. But it is, it's the story of our time, right? So it's that you can't really be over it. It doesn't work that way.
And it's tough. It's like I was somewhere the other day and someone wasn't wearing a mask. I'm in this building, I hate to say, and I see people without masks. And it's like,
I know.
Do I have to be a mask police?
Yeah. You're going to do battle all day, every day about people who don't know how to respect others. It's too much.
I'm not even going to get into it because it's like, do I want to now be like a tattle, like a mask tattle on this podcast? But I just saw 2 people in the lobby without a mask. It's like, what do I have to do? I don't. It's so frustrating. Meanwhile, it is increasingly unlikely that a new economic stimulus bill is going to be here before the election. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin saying as much, accusing Speaker Pelosi of being unwilling to make a deal that could give the White House a win. Pelosi says a $1.8 trillion deal just is not enough and doesn't include funding for national coronavirus testing. So this is turning into a real political situation here.
Yeah, football, I guess. I don't really know why Pelosi isn't just daring the Senate Republicans to vote on that $1.8 trillion bill, because I don't think they would pass it. But she's up to something. I don't really know what it is. Apropos of nothing, I do want to quickly just point out to a story that's in the New York Times this morning. So back on February 24th, Trump's economic team privately addressed the Hoover Institute, which is this sort of like conservative think tank, implying that a COVID outbreak could prove worse than advisors were signaling to the public. So the aides from the White House appearing to give wealthy party donors just an early warning about what they thought was going to be a real crisis. Look, this buttresses what we already know from the Woodward book, and we don't have to stay on it for long. But which is just the fact that the White House knew this was going to be bad, but they didn't do anything except, in this case, warn their rich buddies. It's just enough to make your blood boil. And Jill, I swear, for everyone listening, I swear I'm not this righteous ideologue normally. I really do try and keep an open mind, but I just cannot hide my outrage at the people in power in this country and how badly they have mismanaged literally everything they were given this year. And I'm sorry if I just seem like such a curmudgeon. I really am.
I think that this story is so particularly infuriating because you're talking about people's lives. I think that's what makes this. It's not about taxpayer money. Which can make your blood boil as well. But it's like people are dying and people's lives, and if you're people are sick. This stuff matters. This isn't just
115,000 dead Americans. Did we have to have that?
Now we're going to talk about kind of a crazy story that touches upon some of these issues of social media that we've been mentioning, and it's tough. It's like, I think that the debate we had was, does this even make the podcast? But it's out there and everyone's talking about it, so we should probably just address it. So Facebook and Twitter have now taken steps to limit the reach of a disputed New York Post article which claimed that Joe Biden's son introduced him to a Ukrainian energy executive. Facebook said it was going to reduce the ability to share the story until third-party fact-checkers looked at it. Twitter banned the ability to the link to the story because it violated the policy against posting hacked material. So, Carlo, can you just walk us through a little bit of the backstory here?
Without getting into the specifics of the actual New York Post story, which we don't really know the genesis of it, if the information came from Russian hackers, there's talk that maybe it did, and we know that obviously Russia is sowing a disinformation campaign against Biden right now. But the issue that makes this a relevant story to me is just the thing that what you said, Joe, what we've been talking about, which is this issue that is going to become more and more of a major problem in this country, which is what is the role of these social media companies in the public square, right? They've been saying they're just tech companies, but now they're playing the role of editor, right? I mean, and it's very ham-handed. I mean, this is a complete gift to the GOP, what they did yesterday. So putting aside the contents of that article, conservatives are outraged. They're furious over this, saying that these social media giants are suppressing conservative thought. And again, this is really tricky. As I said when we were talking about the Holocaust denial with regard to Facebook the other day, Twitter and Facebook, these guys, they're terrified of getting accused of being the vessel of misinformation ahead of the election like they were last time. But as I said, do we want to live in a world where Jack Dorsey or Mark Zuckerberg or their employees decide what content we see? On the other hand, right, again, this is very hard. Freedom of speech is not freedom of reach, right? Nobody has the right to post something on Twitter or to post something on Facebook. It's that they can do whatever they want. So look, I mean, I think that this goes back to something that I said a while ago when we were talking about the movie The Social Dilemma on Netflix. We got to get to a place, I think, when we say, you guys have to abolish the algorithms. The algorithms are the problem. The algorithms that these companies use to surface this material and spread it, that's the cause of almost all the problems that we have with social media when it comes to misinformation, conspiracy theories. It should be like you go on Twitter, you follow a chronological list of the people you want to follow. You go on Facebook, you follow your friends and family members and people who you want to have on your newsfeed. It shouldn't be forcing content on you that the algorithm thinks you want. It's just a bad idea.
So Brian Stelter pointed out, that while Facebook and Twitter took action to limit the story's spread, it was still widely shared. It was actually the second most shared election-related story that this media analytics firm Signal tracked this month behind the story about Trump's taxes. So the story's out there already.
Of course.
These social media companies are always kind of just being reactive. They're not proactive to this type of stuff. Ben Smith, who is the New York Times media columnist, I thought he had a really interesting take. He wrote, "The mistake the media made with WikiLeaks wasn't primarily covering the substance. It was failing to realize that the hack and leak was a much bigger story than the contents. Here, the story of the Post story is more interesting than its substance, but it won't burn your eyes out." And then another great take on it, and I'm not trying to plagiarize other people. I'm attributing it to them, but I think a lot of smart journalists have come out with some great takes. Joe Bernstein from BuzzFeed said, "This seems like a case where Twitter and Facebook, through their unfathomable clumsiness, are going to make the story a much bigger deal than it is."
Yeah, they call this the Streisand effect, right? When you try and suppress something and end up just making it a bigger story than it would have been if you just let it go. So this stuff is really tough. I do have a little bit of an issue with Facebook, with Twitter saying that, that this violated their policy on hacked material, because it seems to me like that's a policy that's really in place for things like, celebrity photo hacks and stuff like that. It's a really clumsy policy, because remember, a lot of substantive news comes from not necessarily hacks, but ways that aren't necessarily legal, right? I mean, look at the Trump tax story. We don't even really know how that story came about, but it was obtained in such a way that one might argue it would have fallen afoul of a policy like this, if that makes any sense.
It does. Okay, I just want to quickly mention that because there's just been so much happening, we forgot to mention that the World Series is almost here. So it was looking like it was going to be the Tampa Bay and Atlanta facing off in the Fall Classic, but the Astros and the Dodgers not going down without a fight. Houston edged out a win last night against Tampa Bay in the ALCS to keep its postseason alive, but it was Game 3 of the NLCS that headed for the history bucks. The Dodgers put on an offensive clinic, scoring 11 runs in the first inning before the Braves even had a chance to bat. That's crazy, Carlo.
The most runs ever in a single inning in a postseason game. So I'm glad that we mentioned it briefly. So the Dodgers won 15-3, keeping their season alive. 11 runs in 30 minutes. It's amazing. If you watch that inning, it literally just the runners just keep circling the bases. It looks like a video game or something. So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
What did they have for breakfast? They need to just repeat whatever they did. Try and do that again.
Yesterday. Yeah.
All right, everybody, we're going to leave it there. Sorry we got so political today, but that's just unfortunately, I think we might be in this position for at least another couple weeks leading up to the election.
Yeah. By the way,
okay.
Jill, before we go, very quickly, I do want to mention that you wrote a great op-ed on Cheddar yesterday about, it was sort of based on what you were talking about a couple weeks ago about how hard it is to be a working mom right now. So I just wanted to plug that. I linked to it in the newsletter today. If you haven't read it, it's good. It's great, actually.
Thank you. I kind of poured my heart out. I had a few texts. I had a lot of emails from people saying, thank you for saying this out loud. I had a couple of people being like, are you okay?
Yeah.
You know, in a real way, like actually like, are you all right? You want to talk? I am okay. I'm just exhausted. And I think a lot of people can relate, especially if you're working and you're trying to parent during all this. It's just, it's a lot. And
I'm exhausted, Jill, and I don't even have a kid, so I can only imagine.
You know, and I appreciated when we talked about it the other day on the podcast, and I, without really planning, kind of just poured my heart out to you and to everyone listening. I appreciated a lot of the support that I got back from listeners, and I can't tell you how much that means to me, and it's really helped make this a little bit easier, knowing we're kind of all in it together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we got to leave it there. That's what you need to know for Thursday, October 15th.
See you tomorrow, guys.